So I'll start with my truss by taking my wall elevation out, and I'm going to put my truss elevation in. Now to get this to fit, right, the bag is a little bit smaller than it could be. So to get it to fit, I'm simply going to come down here to one edge, and I'm just going to fold the edge of the plan. I need to fold like 3/4 of an inch or so. Now it should fit in the bag. Let's slide in there. It's important that you build this in the bag because you need 3 trusses. So you can't afford to ruin the picture after the first truss, so you'll have a hard time building the other one. So I'm going to look and find my truss bundle. That's all wrapped together with some plastic. And I will know the trusses because if I look on the back side, it has notches, 3 notches that work their way up the side of the truss. So I'm going to go ahead and get that and take those pieces out. There they are. And they're gonna sit right here on the roof rafters. The other piece I'm gonna need here are the ceiling joists. The ceiling joists have the points at each end. So in all, this is gonna make 3 trusses. The first thing I wanna do is I want to make note that the blue end, the end marked in blue, is the end that I'm going to cut. I have to cut each rafter, and I want to make sure I'm cutting the blue end. The blue end is the end that should be cut. I'm going to take my first rafter. I'm going to lay it right on my picture, and I'll mark right where the top of the cut is, the very ridge, the very peak of my rafter. And now I have that mark. Now it is possible that your teacher pre-cut these to the right angle. They don't need any work on your part. You're simply going to assemble it. So you want to make sure you check with your teacher on that. In my class, you're going to cut them. The student is going to cut them. So I'm going to come back over, I'm going to find my miter box, and I'm going to note that I have this angled cut. There's a really steep one, that's a 45-degree angle. Then there's kind of a very slight angle, that's the 24.5-degree angle. When I cut these roof rafters, the notches go up in the air. So the long point of the rafter should be on the side of the rafter that has the notches in it. The short side of the rafter should be along the bottom with no notches in it. So it should look something like this. So the rafter is going to sit like that at the angle that it shows in the truss. The notches face up towards the sky. And so that's going to mean that the truss should sit like that. This is the long end of the truss. This is the short end. And this is the blue end. So this is the correct end to be cutting. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to make sure from the front of my truss I can see my mark. And what I'll do is I'll use this one once I get it cut. If I do it right, I'll use this as my template to cut the other pieces. I'm going to put my miter box on the edge of the table. I'm going to line up my pencil mark that I made. That's the long end of my rafter, right with that groove that's in the miter box. And then I'm going to pinch that board tight against the edge. And I'm going to cut a 24.5-degree angle on the end of my board. There it is. I'll set my rafter on top of my picture, and I really want to just see, does it match up exactly? The closer it matches up on all accounts, the better off I'm going to be. That seems pretty good. Now again, remember, I need to cut the blue end of the rafter. So I'm going to take that next rafter. I need 3 of these that are cut just like this one, 3. So here's one. I'm going to lay that next one right on top of it. I want to double check to make sure that the notches are all lined up evenly. If they are, I'll take my pencil and draw my line across. I'll go ahead and lay out all 3 of these. Okay, there will be my 3. Now I'm not going to lay out any more of these. I want to be careful to wait to make sure I'm doing this right. My first 3 rafters are cut with the correct angle on the end. They line up with my drawing when I lay it on here, so I think I'm good to go. Now I need to go ahead and do the other 3 rafters that fit on the other side. So to begin with, I'm going to collect up those pieces of wood, and then I need to remember that I'm cutting on the blue side. I'm going to lay those 3 rafters down on the paper in front of me, and I'm going to just use the correct template or the correct rafter for a template. I'm going to line it up at the far end, lay it directly on that piece, and then I'm going to mark it. Do the same thing on the next one. Line it up, lay it on there perfectly, mark it, and then finally come to the third one, line it up directly on the end, make sure it's lined up, double check the notches, they look pretty good, and mark it. So now I have the last 3 of the pieces are all marked and ready to go. Now I can cut them. I'm going to use the 24-degree angle on my miter box. All right, I'm done with the roof rafters. I've got my 6 rafters cut. So I'm going to put them together like that. Now, if I need to adjust this angle at all, I'm going to do that using my sanding block. I'm going to grab one of my ceiling joists, put that ceiling joist right in here. In order to make my roof truss, I'm going to need to cut a little block here that fits in the center of all of that. In order to do that, I'm going to want to go look for some scrap material, some of my extra parts material, and I'm going to try to find a piece of wood like this one right here that is ceiling joist or roof rafter material. If you take a 2x4 and lay it right on top of it, you will notice that it's actually much thinner. So we're going to need the thicker material to make this piece work. All right, now let's take a look. What do we do with this ceiling joist material once we've found it? The first thing that I'm going to do with this ceiling joist material is I want to cut this point at the top. And to put the point on the piece of this ceiling material, I'm going to put a mark in the center. I'm then going to take my miter box and my saw, and I'm going to put the blade again in that really shallow angled cut, and I'm going to slide the material up till the pencil mark, the center of the board, seems to fall right at the edge of the saw, and then I'm going to cut that. Now I'm going to take this piece and I'm simply going to flip it over like that. slide it back up, set my saw in here. It should meet about the top, the tip of that little point. I can take and put a pencil mark on it again right there, so it's roughly the center. Now I'm going to come up, put my saw back in there, do the exact same thing, cutting back in the opposite direction. And there it is. So now there it is. There's the tip, the point that's been cut on my piece. Now it's not perfect, so the way I'm going to fix it is I'm simply going to grab my sand block and I'm just going to move it back and forth. Until it looks much better and much more pointed. Now I'm going to take that up here. So when I put my piece that I cut in here, I can look right in here and see that it's way too steep. I've got some good angles in there that are open. So I'm going to come back with my sanding block and I'm just going to start doing some sanding work. So I need to make this the angle less steep. And again, as I'm going to do that, it's easier if I do it with the sanding block. I'll keep looking at my pencil line and I'll keep sanding. So I'm also going to fix my rafters. There, I can see that the bottom of the angle is a little bit open. So again, I'm just going to very gently, very carefully put it on the sanding block, sand it a few times. Now when I put it back together, it fits in the truss picture much closer. Now when I put all my pieces together right here, it's a much better fit. This looks way better. I think I'm gonna live with that. That looks pretty good. So now what I'm gonna need to do is mark the other end of the little block. So I set my block in there, and now I'm just gonna go directly from my picture and put a mark right there on the edge of the block where I need to cut it, and cut it with my miter box. Now I'm going to remember that I have a kerf. I don't want that piece to end up being too short, so I need to be on the outside of that line. I want to leave the line so I can see it when I'm done. Put that piece back in there. Now I'm going to grab my ceiling joist. I have my first truss down. Now I need to get the other two done. Let me show you how we're going to glue together our trusses. So I'll start up here at the ridge. Put some glue on. And it's really critical that when I lay these down here on the truss template that I make sure they line up. I don't want to just put the two pieces together and have it lay wherever it does. I want it to match the picture exactly. Now at this point I might find that I need to get my sander out and do a little adjusting. This looks pretty good. So I'm going to just hold that top where it comes together for maybe a count of 25. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'm going to put pressure on it. 9, 10, 24, 25. Next, I'm going to take my ceiling joist and put some glue on the pointed ends of it. And again, I'm going to adjust everything so that I seem to fall right on my drawing. The closer that this is to the drawing, the better it's going to come out. That piece seemed a little long. Okay, that fits a lot better. By having it like that, it's not going to push the truss apart, and I can also stay within the picture frame. I do not want this to end up being if I change the shape from this truss to my other truss, then they aren't going to line up very well. All right, looks good. Now, you might have noticed when you were looking at the truss picture that we have these little rectangles over each of the joints. Those are called gusset plates. A gusset plate is a metal plate that is usually nailed onto the truss to make the joints very strong and help hold them together. So I'm going to go ahead and simulate that by using some tape. If you have duct tape at home, gray duct tape will work great for that. I'm just going to use, this is HVAC tape for metal piping, and I was looking for my duct tape and I happened to see this, and so I decided, well, I'll just cut a piece of this and try using it. And I'm going to cover the plate with it, cover the joint with it. All right, there's my second truss, and now to the final one. We've moved into a new stage in our home construction. Our wall section is completed, and you can see that we've raised our walls and attached them. Now we're getting ready to create our roof. So I've assembled the trusses, and now the trusses have to be assembled into the roof unit. So I'm going to show you now how I do that. I'll take that apart, set it aside a little bit. What I'm going to need to assemble the truss unit is the plans that look like this. Okay, so it says on there, roof section top view. And I'm essentially looking straight down on top of my house. This top view is going to show me how to space all of these trusses out. So I need to cut two different pieces. On my plan, my roof section plan, I see 3 boards. Now, I'm going to double this because this is only half of the roof, right? But I see 3 boards, and these are called outlookers. So I need 6 of those in total. I'm simply gonna lay my 2x4 material on my picture, mark it, and cut it to length so I have 6 outlookers. I also see up at the top that it says blocking between trusses. So I see a little space there. I'm gonna use some of my rafter or joist material, and I'm gonna lay that in here, and I'm going to mark and cut the blocking. That's gonna go right along the ridge, the top, the high point of my roof. So I'll cut that. And once I get those pieces cut, then I can start to put this roof section together. I'm gonna lay my 2x4 material right on my plans and mark the 6 outlookers. And then I will cut my 3 blocks doing the same thing. Now, if you make a piece and it's just barely too long, I'm not sure how well this blade is going to really cut through that. It's not going to want to slice just a tiny amount. So you may be better off getting it to its length by simply sanding it. That might go faster than attempting to barely cut anything off the end of the board. Now I need 6 outlookers, and then I also need 3 blocks. The blocks are going to go up at the very tip of the roof, the very top, the peak. And I'll cut my block. All right, got my 3 blocks for the top. I've got 3 of the outlookers. I'm going to cut 3 more, and then I'll come back and show you how we assemble this. As I put together my roof structure, the next thing I'm going to do after cutting the outlookers is I'm actually going to mark on the outlooker with my pencil, using my drawing, where the trusses are going to go. And this is very similar to what I would do in a real house setting, right? I might do a layout on a ridge rafter every 16 inches or every 24 inches or however wide the rafters were supposed to be spaced. I would lay that all out with pencil, and then I would go in and put the rafters into place. On the roof section, it shows me where each of the rafters should lie. So I'm going to lay this on there, and then I'm going to put a pencil mark where each of the rafters falls on the outlooker. And you can see that's going to look something like that. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put them all together, and I'm going to use the one that I marked to draw a line all the way across all of them. And I'm going to do that using a tri-square. Now, you've seen me use a regular tri-square. I'm going to use my miter box as a tri-square. So right there is a tri-square shape, right? There's a handle. If I push that up against my board, it's going to hold the blade, which comes out here, perpendicular. So I think I can do 3 at a time, so I can do it in a couple attempts. And here's what that would look like. I'm going to hold it up like that. You can see that here's my piece, there's the mark, The other two I have lined up across the surface, and now I'm going to go like that and mark it. Then I'm going to slide it down to the other side, the other pencil mark, and do the same thing. Draw it across. I can slide it down. There's my next pencil mark, and draw that across to my next pencil line. Okay, and I'll just do that on all of them using my miter box that I'm cutting with as a tri-square. Once my pieces are laid out, they should look something like that. Now I'm ready to go and assemble the trusses using these pieces, the outlookers, as a guide. All right, and then there's all of the pieces, and they're all marked so that I can see where I'm going to lay out my truss. And this will tell me right where each truss is supposed to line up. All right, let me show you a problem here that I'm going to need to fix. And you may run into this in your house when you put together your roof structure. So this outlooker seems to fit fine. This outlooker seems to fit fine as well. But up here, this outlooker on the top, the notches for the outlooker doesn't line up. So I can't get the outlooker down in this hole. It won't fit in the front notch. One of the notches is off. Now I could try to bend the board, and the boards will have some flex. So if I bend it hard enough, it would probably go down in there. But I'm going to run the risk of breaking my trusses, and I run the risk of I tried putting it together like that before, and literally when I got it all together, it held together, but I tried to sit it on the top of my house, and it wouldn't sit flat. All of that pressure on the trusses held them all cockeyed. So when I went to set it down on the structure itself, it wouldn't work. It rocked back and forth, and there was no way I was going to get it to stop doing that. So what I'm going to do here is, and this is true on a house. There are places in a house where you just have to recut the notch a little bit bigger. Doesn't fit as tight as you would like, but you put some nails in it. You put all the rest of the stuff around it, and it's going to be fine. It's not a problem. And in the midst of the whole big picture, it's best to just move past that issue and move on quickly with the fastest, the best quick fix, as opposed to trying to get a whole new truss and all of that kind of stuff is too costly, too slow of a process. So we're gonna fix it similar to what we might do in a real situation, which is I'm just gonna simply mark the truss right here. Okay, so now you can see where the truss is big. It's off by quite a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to recut this notch using my saw, and then I'll use a utility knife to take that little piece out. Then I should be able to put it back together and have the outlooker fit in nicely, and it'll be fine. In a real house, once this is all covered over with all the exterior stuff, you would never see any of that. So let me show you how I would cut it. So I'm going to take my miter box. Now this truss isn't going to fit in the miter box. So instead of sticking it down in the miter like that and trying to cut it like I've cut everything out, I'm actually going to take it and put it right here in front of the miter. And I'm going to move it up so that the line that I drew is right in line with this 90-degree cut, the notch that's in my miter box. All right, so with the truss sitting directly in front of my miter box. I'm going to hold it real flat on there so that my cut goes straight in. And now holding it against my bench, I'm going to make the same cut that I normally would. And I'm going to look right here on the front of the truss and make sure that I don't go too far down. I seem to be pretty good. So now there's my truss. I've made my cut down to the notch. Now, there's not an easy way to cut that. Using my miter saw is not going to do it. Using this little saw is not a good way to cut that out. So I'm going to take a utility knife, right? We talked about the fact that utility knife is the primary way we cut stuff in the wood shop. And I'm simply going to take the utility knife, I'm going to put it directly in line with the bottom of the notch, and I'm just going to push down. And there it goes. The little piece came out, and I can come back with my utility knife and there's my notch. Looks great. It's a little bigger than it should be, but I put the glue in there. If I was doing this on a real job, I might even cut a little block out of another piece of wood and nail down in there next to it so that it held that piece in there strong. And I think I can move on, and I will get away with the fact that these didn't line up. It's now time to assemble our truss system to make our roof. And you can see our drawing, our plan is a bird's eye view of the truss system. I'm going to show you now how we're going to put that together using our truss plan and all of the trusses that we have made. Let me show you how I'm going to assemble this. I'll start with my outlookers. I've got them marked where the trusses go. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and add glue and line these all up. I'll stand the 3 trusses up here. And I'm going to put a little bit of glue in the notch. I'm going to take another scrap piece of wood and just use that to move the glue around. Get it on the edges, the sides of the notch. As I put the outlooker in, I want the pencil marks facing up so I can double check to make sure I'm aligning everything correctly.
Just sitting here.
Now I'm going to use my tri-square, or I'm going to use my miter box. I've used it as a tri-square. I'm going to set it over here. And just kind of keep my roof structure up against it so I can make sure that my trusses are going straight up. Now I'm going to take the other 3 and put them in the other side. So I'll put a little bit of glue in each notch. And again, I'm going to add the pieces in here. I'm going to add the outlookers, and I want the pencil facing up and showing so I can see that I'm aligned. I can make sure my marks are all aligned. And that looks pretty good. Those all seem to line up. So then I'm going to just make sure the pencil mark and the truss are aligned. I'll move that one over a little bit. That looks pretty good. Up here in the front, I had to recut one and make the notch a little bigger. That fits fine. When I look at this one over here, down in this corner, I noticed that this spacing looks a little bigger than this spacing, but I also noticed that this rafter, this truss, is off a little bit. It's a little further out of the line. So that's what the pencil is for, is to help me space all of this stuff accurately. Right, so I'm having to work on both sides, check both sides at the same time. I'm going to come back over here, put my miter box up against there, and just try to make sure that it should stand very flat against the miter box. I don't want the whole roof structure leaning forward or leaning back. It won't fit on my house that way. All right, I have all my pieces in there. Now I need to set that and let it dry. If I have some extra 2x4 material, I'm going to take that and I'm going to cut two pieces. One piece is going to go through the center of my trusses on the left side. One piece is going to go through the center of the trusses on the right side. I'm going to cut this little piece. I'm going to lay it on here. This is called a cord tie, and this is holding the ceiling joists or the rafter ties together. It keeps them spaced correctly. So I'll lay it on my blueprint, on my drawing, and I'm going to mark right where that middle piece is going to go. And then I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to use my miter box as a tri-square. Draw that across both pieces, slide it down, right across both pieces. Well, here's my pieces. I've marked them. You can see the pencil mark I put right here in the middle. So one rafter will sit here, one rafter will sit at the other end, and the other rafter will sit right through the center. And so these are called the bottom cord tie. These are going to hold the ceiling joist or the rafter ties in the right location. So now I'm going to bring my roof back over. I'm going to set my miter box up right next to it to make sure everything is sitting up straight up and down. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to put a little bit of glue on it. A little bit at one end, a little bit at the other end, and right in the center. And then I'm going to center this right in this bottom, in one of the little triangles. I'll just center it right in the little triangle. And I can check to see that my middle truss lines up with the pencil down there. If not, I'm going to tilt it just a little bit. I'll tweak it, move it over a little bit to see if I can get it to line up underneath there. And now I'll go ahead and put the other one on as well. A little bit of glue at one end, a little bit in the middle behind my pencil mark, and then right through the center of this triangle. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm going to add these blocks in a few minutes, but for now I want to let this dry without a lot more work. So let me show you what I'm going to do. All right, so now that my roof structure is done and it needs to dry, I'm going to carefully just pick it up and set it on top of the walls. It's really important that as this roof structure dries, it dries flat. If it's twisted as it's drying because it's sitting on a couple of little blocks or a little piece of something or your pencil or a book on your desk, then when you go to put it on here, it's not going to sit flat. And you're going to push down and it's going to go like this, back and forth, back and forth. And there's no way to fix that once this is all glued. So I'm going to set it on there like that and double check to see that both ends sit flat. They do. Everything seems to line up pretty good. Now here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to let it dry on there. So if I was at home doing this and I didn't have any clamps, I'd probably substitute something like this. I would take 2 books or maybe 2 bricks. I would take some tape, and I don't want the books or the bricks to slide off my roof. So I'm going to put a little tape on there to keep the books from sliding off either side of the roof. And if I'm at home with my books taped together, I would simply set the books on there like that. I'm going to slide everything around to make sure it's all sitting very flat on the top of my wall section, and then I'm going to go to bed and I'm going to let that dry. And I'll come back tomorrow. That should all be very secure and ready to put the last finishing touches on my roof structure, and I'm done. I'm ready to move on to the next thing. I'm now going to open the last pieces of my kit, and this should have I believe it's a dark green mark on it. These are the fascia material. We've learned about that in our shop talk. And the fascia material is the trim that's going to go all the way around the outside of my my roof section. So I have 3 pieces of fascia material. I'm going to set one of them aside. That's going to come up the short sides of my my house, and then the 2 long pieces are going to go in the front. I'll start by cutting the 24-degree angle at one end of each of the boards. So the 24-degree angle is the short angle, or the angle that's not very steep. I'll go ahead and throw this in here, grab my saw, on the front section. Before I put my fascia on there, very carefully I just want to make sure the pieces are flat. All right, so I can sand them, make sure they're flat. So I put those two pieces from the fascia on there like that, and they're going to make a nice trim piece all the way around the front. To cut the short fascia piece, I'm going to lay my fascia material, the long fascia material, onto the front of my roof structure. I'm going to hold the other piece of wood up like that, and I'll just simply take my pencil and mark underneath it. That'll tell me how long my short fascia material needs to be. I can then cut that piece of material, and I've got my short piece. I'll do that on both sides. The next piece that I need to cut now is going to be my long piece. That's a little trickier. To do that, I'm going to get the help of my miter box. So I'm going to set my miter box like this up next to my roof structure. And I want the edge of the miter box coming up to run right through the center of the top point of all of the rafters. And I'm going to do that because now that's going to tell me where these two large fascia pieces need to meet. So that looks pretty good, right? I want to make sure that all 4 points, the 3 rafters and the fascia, where the peak of the fascia is, they should all align. So now I'm going to hold that piece on there. I'm going to take the short piece, right? So you see I've got the short piece that I cut. I'm going to set it down here right underneath the fascia. And now I'm going to go back with my pencil and mark underneath the large fascia piece. So there's my line. You can see that here's where I need to cut the large fascia piece in order to make this work. So now I can grab my miter box, grab the fascia piece, and cut it. Now I'd rather the fascia piece be a little long, right? I can always come back and sand it down, but if I make it too short, then it's hard to stretch it. So I'm always okay with it being a tiny bit long. I can come back and sand it. So there's that side. Got that done. Well, I've got my long piece and my short piece cut for the fascia on the right side of my house. I'm going to go ahead and just cut the left side. You've already seen it, so I'll join you back here again when I've got those pieces cut. So I'm going to start by gluing the material on the short end. Once the material is glued onto the short ends, then I will come back and add the longer pieces on the front. So I'll put a little glue on the end there. Now my short pieces are glued on to the ends of the fascia material. Now I have to glue the long pieces onto the outlookers. I just want to make sure that the top surface of the roof is all flat. I want the fascia to be flat with the surface of the roof joists, the fascia material is wider than the roof joists, so it needs to hang down on the bottom. The top should be perfectly flush. Now I'm ready to glue my longer fascia pieces onto the top. So I'm going to go ahead and just put some glue on here onto the ends of the outlookers. I'm going to put a little glue onto that short fascia piece. Alright, so this left side is done. Now I'm going to come in and do the same thing on the right side. Put a little bit of glue on each of the outlookers. Put a little bit of glue on the shorter fascia piece. And then I'm going to put glue on the angle, the 24, it's about a 24-degree angle up here at the peak. So I want to put glue on that as well. If you notice that where the two fascia pieces meet, they don't meet very well, the angle appears to be wrong, you can always fix that with the sandpaper. Alright, so my angle is a little bit off here. I'm going to go ahead and sand it just a little bit. Alright, that looks a little better, so I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the end of the fascia board. Again, make sure the fascia sits flat with the surface of the roof up here, the top of the roof. We want it to do all of its overhanging underneath the surface of the roof. Now, that looks pretty good for now. I'm going to go ahead and let that sit for a few minutes and dry. Now, while this is sitting here drying, I'm going to go ahead and add in the little blocks. So, initially I had some blocks cut that would fit in between the roof rafters up at the very peak. So this is where we're going to be nailing off plywood across the top of our roof, and we want a surface to nail the plywood against. This can be done a number of different ways, right? So traditionally you would nail this off and it should be solid across the top of your roof. Modern day roofing oftentimes will leave the two pieces of plywood short so that there's a hole down the center of the roof, and that's going to allow the hot air, right? Hot air rises. So that'll allow the hot air that's collecting in your attic or in your garage, and it would allow it to escape out through the top. And modern day roofs, it's more expensive, but you can put a little filter system up there. You can put a little escape hatch so that you have all your tiles on there, your roof tiles, but there's some material that allows for the air to come up through that opening in the plywood and then escape out. So in our example that we're building right here, I'm just making it solid the traditional way. So I'm putting blocking along there that's going to allow me to put plywood and nail it all off. So I put my two blocks in there. They're drying now, and I'm going to cut one last block right here for the top. So now that this is all constructed, again, I want to put a block right here between the front truss and my fascia material. So it's going to fit right between the truss and the fascia material right there. So I'm going to mark that and cut it, and then I'll glue that in, and then I'll just let that dry till next time. So I've got two things left to do. I'm going to glue my roof now, my roof structure, onto my walls. And then I've got a couple of little blocks to put in. These are called bird blocks. And at the end of my ceiling joist and at the end here of my rafter, once I glue this on, if this was a real house, there's a little space in here where a bird could get in, a rat could get in, some sort of animal could get in. So that has to all be blocked off with little blocks to seal up the exterior of the house from the interior of the house. So that will be my last little bit. For now, I'm going to go ahead and glue this on. And I'm going to go ahead and do it the way you saw me do it before. So I know these will fit flat because I let it dry on here flat. And now I'm going to bring my books back. That's going to put a good amount of weight down and help hold everything flat. I'll check on it again before I let it dry and just make sure the front truss should be aligned flat with the front of my house. And boy, everything else looks really good. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave it at that. I'm going to let it dry, and then I'll come back and add the bird blocks later. So this looks good. We've successfully completed 2 steps now. We've built the wall section and framed that. We have built our trusses, framed the trusses, and put our roof together, and then installed it on the top of our structure. And now we're down to some last little details like putting in drywall, putting some siding on the outside of the house, things like that to give us an idea of how that works, and we will have finished our project. So I'll see you next time when we wrap up this construction project, the model house.